It's official. Labour will be lowering the voting age to 16 at the next election.
They think it's going to help their chances, but has Keir Starmer actually handed victory on a plate to either Nigel Farage or Jeremy Corbyn?
Labour is ahead, but not by a massive amount. Reform's in second, but Jeremy Corbyn is the most popular politician. And I do wonder if there is any politician potentially capable of mobilising and motivating this group, whether it might be Jeremy Corbyn.
To be fair, Tim, there was a spoiler alert for this in the Labour Party manifesto.
Yeah.
They did say they were doing this whole let's let 16 and 17-year-olds vote. You were in Parliament witnessing the statement that was made by whom?
By Rationale, who is the Minister for both Democracy and Homelessness.
What?
What a brief.
Doesn't make sense.
Labour did say it would do it, but in the same way that we never quite believed Putin would actually invade Ukraine. There was a part of me that thought they might not go ahead with it.
Yes.
So today in the Commons, they unveiled their package of democratic reforms. It's not just votes for 16-year-olds. It's things like tightening up foreign money donations, a crackdown on intimidation of MPs, which is something which worries MPs a lot. It's a bit like those signs in train stations that say, we know the service is terrible, but don't abuse the staff.
No, indeed. And also in the light of David Amess, Joe Cox.
Of
and all the
course,
rest of it.
yes. And interestingly, they are going to keep voter ID.
Yes. Well, that's a good thing.
That is a good thing, but I just think it's interesting that Labour have decided to stick with that one. But
because we thought that they sometimes had the odd voter that might vote in their university town and then vote again in their hometown, and they always denied this. By the way, just for the record, before we get onto the age thing, I thought it was absolutely ludicrous that you didn't have to show ID to vote.
Yeah.
You have to show ID to hire a car.
Yes.
Anyway.
You say that. I've argued it for years. The first time I went and they asked for it, I was really angry.
Yes, I remember you writing about that.
How
It's like,
dare
how
you?
dare they?
Who do they think I am or not know who I am?
Yeah, but I think it's sensible. But on the youth, youth of today.
That was the big one. So the rationale for this is various MPs said that, in fact, the whole session had the air of a meeting of the Youth Parliament, that 16 and 17-year-olds are desperate to get involved. They are the future. That phrase was used a great deal. And we must give the younger generation a say. Now, of course, I wanted to scream from the gallery, if they just wait 2 years,
yes,
they can have a say.
They can have that. Also, they're having a say the whole time on social media.
Well,
we
precisely.
don't stop hearing from these people. Some of them are children.
Yeah.
They start turning up at COP climate conferences like Greta Thunberg. We all have to listen to them. Then they get in boats and get involved in the Middle East. I mean, we've had it up to here with, frankly, children pretending to be adults.
Yes, exactly. The Tories, Paul Holmes, made a decent, but I didn't think very passionate pushback against it. He pointed out that under this change, 16-year-olds will be able to vote, but not able to run for office.
Yeah.
And of course, they
It's a
will also be
cogent
blocked from having a drink, having a smoke, getting married, going to war, etc.
Yes.
So, but I didn't feel the Tories pushed very hard.
Yeah, but they've given up. They've
kind
given up on the youth
They've given
vote.
up, but I also wonder if there's an element of, once a group of people have been enfranchised, you're not going to slag them off.
I know, but
so prior to them having the vote, you were free to say young people aren't ready. Once they have the vote, no politician is going to go around saying this block of voters aren't ready to do it.
No, but the other problem is that a young Conservative is now as lesser spotted than a snow leopard in Haringey.
Well, a young Conservative is anyone under 80 now. But but so I sensed watching this very sparsely attended, very dry and dull debate. I got the sense there were two sides to this. One is a group of people who passionately believe, for whatever mad reason, that 16-year-olds should vote. But there's also, of course, a cynical side to this, which is Labour has always assumed that the electoral system is stacked against it because of first past the post and because of the old vote. And so the left has begun to endorse things like proportional representation, which is permissible in local elections, right? But for some reason not in a general. Why is that? Is it because Labour's worked out that actually it would have lost the last election?
Protectionism.
And the other thing is Labour thinks if we give 16-year-olds the vote, then we are more likely to get their votes than the Tories are. Now, of course, one of the ironies of this is now they're in government. And now that they are less popular than Putin in Kiev, they might be starting to realize that that wasn't such a good move, because younger people who don't yet have a stake are not quite so conservative in their temperament, let alone their politics. So younger people might be drawn towards those parties which are benefiting from the collapse of trust in Labour, which is either the far left, Jeremy Corbyn and Sultana's party, yet to be named, or even the right, Reform. I think it's highly ironic that the one MP who gave the strongest case against lowering the age of voting is someone who could have benefited from it, and that's Richard Tice.
We at Reform are very much against votes for 16 to 17-year-olds. It's interesting to know that they themselves are completely split down the middle on this issue.
That is interesting, because I have felt so hard to judge from your own teenagers in the home demographic what the wider country is feeling. But I did think post I'm a Celebrity that Farage had become much more popularised among that generation. And for instance, when I come home from work, you know, if I've seen Farage, I would probably mention it to my son because he'd be interested in it, but not if I'd seen Starmer or Badenoch. And I think when I'm asked by younger people, you know, who do I know? Or do you, it's often, do you get this? Do you know Farage? I mean, you work with Farage at GB News. They're obsessed in a way.
If you follow him on the campaign trail, he's mobbed by kids.
Yes, he is.
In a way that no adult mature politician is.
So was the gentleman who was sitting in this chair yesterday, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
That's true.
You'd go to university campuses and he'd be mobbed, and he lost his seat.
I think
because of Reform.
MPs think, one, you're not a real person unless you're engaged in politics. They just think politics is the be-all and end-all of everything. And second, they have an image in their head of what kind of politician people like, and it's them. They think everyone likes a boring, white, middle-aged man. They just, I mean, ironically, they're not boring. That could be Farage or Mogg. They don't realise that actually people are drawn to character.
Yes. Also, they're drawn to clarity.
Yes.
I mean, Jeremy Corbyn in that era.
Yes.
I tell you what, this is a stunning statistic. I mean, I don't want to blind everybody with too many statistics. There's 1.36 million 16 and 17-year-olds out there. Only 18% of them surveyed said that they would definitely vote in an election if it was held today. And then this is interesting on Corbyn, old Compo. So at the 2017 election, when he won 40% of the vote, 60%, 60 of 18 to 24s nationally voted for this guy.
Yeah.
Crazy. I mean, the young, hey? Lacking common sense, bless them. So idealistic. This was you once. You were one of these lefties, weren't you, before you just gained a few years and realised it was all a bit silly?
That is correct. And I'm sure I would have loved to have voted at 16. I probably wanted to vote at 5. But is this partly the consequence of our education system and our culture?
Yes.
Aren't we telling kids in school, your country has an evil history, the planet is dying screaming, you have no future? What a surprise that they don't go on to vote for centrist milquetoast parties that offer more of the same.
I totally agree with you, and I'm all for democracy if it is carried out throughout all of our institutions. So this whole idea of being really equal when it comes to giving 16 and 17-year-olds a say, but hang on a minute, do you give them a say when they're right-leaning and they're in a debate at school and they want to say things like, I'm a bit worried about immigration. Actually, I quite like what Nigel Farage says about X, Y or Z. Oh, I think that Priti Patel and Suella Braverman were unfairly treated. I'm not sure women should be men and men should be women. No, they don't have that equality in school because anything remotely right of centre is usually shut down. Most of the teacher body, let's be honest, is unionised and therefore left-leaning. And I'm sorry, children aren't introduced to both sides of the debate. This is what worries me. So they then end up in the ballot box, influenced by others, in social media echo chambers, following the herd. I think it's difficult unless you're really actively and politically engaged. We are going to speak to a young person in just a moment because we're just two old boomers. Don't know what we're talking about when it comes to Gen Z.
I'm a millennial.
You're a millennial. I'm a Gen X.
Right. There you
go. But what I'm saying is she's going to think we're boomers because we're both over 40.
Yeah.
We're basically gammons. I'm Karen. You're what? What's the equivalent?
Yeah. What is the male? My father. That's
yes,
the
exactly.
Yes.
So basically, that's where this slightly comes unstuck because I feel that an entire generation or two has been indoctrinated against the right, and I don't like it.
Well, let's talk to someone who knows what young people think because they've been polling them. Scarlett Maguire is joining us, who is the founder and director of polling firm Merlin Strategy. You've seen some numbers. Can you tell us, first of all, how keen are young people to vote?
Yeah, no, so we actually ran a poll of 16 to 17-year-olds for this announcement, and we found that they're not actually keen on voting at all. Only half of them think they should be able to vote. So 49% think they should not be able to vote. And only 18%, so that's less than 1 in 5, say they would definitely vote if there was an election held tomorrow.
Right. This is mind-blowing because I have just sat through a statement in the House of Commons in which Labour MPs have told us that young people are raring to take part in democracy. Yes. They feel completely excluded and they deserve a say in our future. But the polling doesn't seem to support that.
No, absolutely not. And actually, and previous examples, so fine, not of 16 to 17-year-olds, but if you look at 18 to 25-year-olds, for example, they vote at lower rates than older age groups. There is nothing to show that this age group is particularly politically engaged. Now, that's not to demonize them. Absolutely fine. They're off busy doing other things, but I do not think they're raring to go to get to the ballot box. Not yet, anyway.
Scarlett, we'll get onto the Farage factor in just a moment. Am I imagining it, or was there a map that was doing the rounds either after 2017 or 2019 showing if young people had been given the vote, this is what would have happened? And it was like, I'm sure under Corbyn, and the whole map was like, it was like a bloodbath. It was so red. Am I imagining that, Scarlett?
Or a nuclear blast.
I don't know if you're imagining it, but there definitely was a lot of talk about how Corbyn was able to turn younger people out to vote. So again, not this young, but there was a lot of talk about the fact that he was managing to appeal to much younger voters. And that, in fact, that part of the reason why he ran Theresa May so close in that 2017 election was because he was inspiring young people to vote. Now, it turns out that in retrospect, that was actually greatly over-exaggerated. So yes, he did appeal to younger voters, but it was not this sort of tidal wave of everyone desperately going out to vote. Far from it. But actually, it is interesting because yes, we've seen, so I can break down some of the results if you like, but Labour is ahead, but not by a massive amount. Reform's in second, but Jeremy Corbyn is the most popular politician. And I do wonder if there is any politician potentially capable of mobilising and motivating this group, whether it might be Jeremy Corbyn.
Wow. So inadvertently, Starmer has emboldened Corbyn to potentially at least split the vote on the left, because of course these youngsters, they will do silly things and they will go and vote for the Greens, Tim, in line with your kind of, they want to rebel, they don't want to go for a uni party.
Yes, but looking at Merlin's figures on how 16 and 17-year-olds would like to vote, it skews left, but it's very divided. So it's Labour 33%, Green 18%, Lib Dems 12%. And in a way that's not entirely dissimilar from the way everyone else is going. It's not just about whether they naturally go left or right, it's that they're actually torn between different options, different varieties of being left-wing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. So there's still the sort of left-wing voters at 16 to 17 still far outnumber the right-wing voters. It's about 2/3 to 1/3 split. I do think it's interesting, though. You're right. It looks more like the population as a whole as you might expect. And I actually think even though Labour have a 13-point lead here, still might be quite disappointing for Keir Starmer. So, for example, at the last election, over 40% of 18 to 25-year-olds, just over 40%, voted for Keir Starmer. So he's doing significantly worse with 16 to 17-year-olds now than he did with 18 to 25-year-olds at the election. I'm sure he'll be quite unhappy about that. Likewise, Reform, so polling 20%. So yes, underperforming their national polling, if you look at everyone overall, but significantly outperforming how they did with this or a similar age group, 80 to 25s at the general. So if you think about those trends potentially continuing, then actually this could become a bit worse for Labour and maybe a bit better for Reform.
Won't we be given a very clear indication of what impact that might have when we look at Scotland and Wales next year? Because we know Reform is already performing well in those areas. Therefore, we can extrapolate probably quite a lot when it comes to Farage's popularity among the Gen Zs from that vote. Am I right, Scarlett? I'm thinking?
Yes. I mean, I was quite interested in this poll, not just because 16 to 17-year-olds have now been given the vote, but because the 16 to 17-year-olds we polled will, of course, would be eligible to vote in a few years regardless as they get older, because they will be past the old voting age at the next election. And I think it points to quite a disengaged, apathetic, divided, and actually, I think slightly there's some quite alarming signs as well. So these findings weren't picked up in quite the same way. But for example, we found that significant minorities, so about 1 in 4 had favourable views of things like a king with no elections, or just over 1 in 5 of a military strongman with no elections. So I think there is a sort of general decline in trust in democracy with this group as well, and I think that's quite worrying.
But I guess that's not entirely surprising given their experience of recent history. I think Labour has gone into this assuming that young people are the way they felt when they were young in the late 80s and early 90s, which is hopeful and full of joy about the future. But actually, the group of people who they are looking to register here, their education has been ruined by lockdown. They're told by everyone that their economic prospects are destroyed. They've got the fear of AI creeping up on them. Could we actually be inviting a large cadre of voters in who are not as naturally social democratic and liberal as the ones that came before?
Yeah, I'm actually incredibly glad you said that, because I think there can be a lot of stereotyping of younger voters based on the preconceptions of what older voters were like when they were that age. And it's actually not quite far from the truth. And again, actually, I think what was quite interesting, just a sort of slight sort of tangent here, but I found it very interesting, for example, that their most important issues are still healthcare, the economy, and immigration are still in their top 3 issues. So they are not sort of raging progressives, all of them, even though, you know, Greens are in 3rd place, for example. So there's definitely a sort of progressive faction in there. And they do actually, it has to be said, they care more about the Israel-Palestine conflicts than they do about climate change, for example. But climate change is low down. And again, I think that doesn't fit the stereotypes of these voters. But no, I think what you're seeing is not just with 16 to 17-year-olds, but in fact, people under 30, or even just people generally who came of age after the financial crisis, have a very different idea of how society should work, namely because the society that we live in haven't worked particularly well for them. And I think that does mean they are potentially more open to alternatives, even if those alternatives are quite unsavoury.
You can be green and authoritarian, right? Because if you're being told that the climate is on the verge of destruction and an entire generation of elected politicians have failed to save it, then logically you might vote thinking, I actually want more power to go to the state to fix this, and I'm frustrated by democracy and feet dragging. So again, as you've suggested, we shouldn't assume that just because they are left wing on some policies that they are liberals.
I think that's absolutely right. And they look quite different. I think that's why it's also quite interesting to for everyone, I think, to pay a little bit more attention. Again, it's not just the 16, 17-year-olds is very attention grabbing, and I think that's great. But in all likelihood, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference at the next election, just because for the reasons we've just been discussing, they're not very likely to vote, and the voting intention looks quite a lot like the general public anyway. But I think it is good to shine a light on younger voters generally. Now, this is probably because I'm getting older, but I now think of sort of younger voters as under 35s rather than maybe under 25s as I used to. But it's a very interesting demographic in it, and their concerns get overlooked. And I think what is particularly interesting about them is they don't seem to be aging out of a lot of these trends. And so that, I think, is quite worrying about the sort of country we're going to become. And again, it's not to demonize them. I'm very, very reluctant to do that, because I have a lot of sympathy for how you might end up with some of these sort of more outlandish or alarming opinions. But I do think it is quite worrying.
Scarlett Maguire of Merlin, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the Daily Tea. Shall we speak to a youngster, a young'un, the youth of today?
Any?
Do we know any? We just happen to have one in my handbag, actually, because my daughter Annabelle joins us now. Welcome, Annabelle.
Hello.
She's doing work experience in Westminster this week. And then when this news landed, I did say to you, got an opinion on this? And you do.
I do.
Share it with us. So tell us, first of all, how old you are.
So I am 16.
Right in the firing line.
Demographic.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Starmer says you're absolutely chomping at the bit to cast your vote.
Well, I'm personally quite politically engaged, so I wouldn't mind voting, but I don't trust the rest of my generation with the vote at this stage in our lives. I don't.
Why not?
That's how we feel about everyone we know as well. That's nothing.
That's how we feel about everyone we disagree with.
Yes.
Yeah.
The best argument against democracy, etc., etc.
Or the vast majority of my friends, I don't think feel ready to vote and don't actually have that much of an interest in voting themselves. When we have political discussions at school, people don't really read the news. People don't have, people discuss it from sources like TikTok, and that's where they're getting their political ideas and things like that. Which means that people my age do have a bit of a bias. And I think that social media has played a huge part in the Israel-Palestine conflict being really important to people, because that's been so big on social media.
Yes.
So I think that you get in a position where micro trends are going to sort of drive people's votes rather than long life principles and thinking about things like housing and the economy, and it's more just sort of flash topics.
I mean, should you actually pay tax?
Say how well put that was.
Give the girl a job. Should you have to pay tax before you vote on how it's spent? I mean, I appreciate some youngsters do leave school at 16, but I think the majority remain in full-time education.
But they do pay some forms of tax, don't they? Because they pay things like VAT.
Well, yeah, you work at a pub and you're paying...
I don't pay any tax on my wages, obviously, no, because it's
Whereas
too
there
long.
are some
Yeah.
adults who do not pay income tax.
But don't you think there's something completely ridiculous about you not being able to stand as a candidate at 16 and yet you can vote for one?
That's very strange.
You can't
yes.
drive.
Yes.
You can't drink.
Yes.
You can't even buy a lottery ticket, can you?
No.
Yes.
18.
You need to give
18 for any form of gambling or entering any of these sort of... Even if you wanted to enter a crossword puzzle at the Telegraph, you'd have to be 18.
Yeah.
Good point. Thank you. And yet give you the vote. I mean, this is.
Yeah.
Do you think this is cynical? I mean, how would you imagine that most of your peers would be going in a Corbyn, Labour, and Green direction, as we were just discussing with Scarlett?
Well, in my personal experience, at my school, they did do in July their own sort of vote to sort of, I guess, to encourage people to be more politically engaged. And the lowest parties were the Tories and Labour. They had the lowest number of votes. I think the Green Party got the most at my school.
Really?
And I genuinely think that the only reason for that is because people know what the Greens stand for without having to do any research or anything. They just go, oh, it's the environment. Okay, at least I know with that, rather than actually taking the time to understand the principles of conservatism or of what Labour stand for. So I think people just go for whatever they understand, or they recognise Nigel Farage, so lots of people are going to Reform, not because, again, they understand the principles, but just because it's like the recognisability of it all, like, oh, I know who Nigel Farage is.
Yes, but we're not entirely sure what the principles of Labour and the Conservatives are
Well, sure.
either, which is, I mean, seriously, because everything has changed, because parties have U-turned on so much, and, Labour, you're now voting for higher defence spending and cutting welfare, it's difficult for anyone to figure out. And so that's one reason why, as we discussed in the interview with Merlin, everyone's voting that way. Everyone is now splitting their votes and going for small parties. It's not just young people. I wonder... is there some confusion here between are we saying that we're worried about young people getting the vote because we assume they're all going to vote for communists?
I think that's
or
what
do we
my
think
worry
young
was,
people just won't vote? In which case, it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah, but this whole thing about luxury communism and the repackaging of communism under Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn at Glastonbury, is really interesting, and it speaks to a lack of education about how many millions of people were killed under communism at school.
Yes, but Annabelle is saying that very few of your friends would probably vote anyway. In which case, who cares if a few extra points go to Corbyn and his nutty party?
I think they would vote. But I don't think they're politically engaged, and I don't think they care to vote. I don't think they would put that much thinking time towards their vote. I think that somebody's vote could genuinely be determined by 2 or 3 TikTok videos.
Right.
I think people still would vote because it's like quite an exciting thing to do, and I think that it would feel quite historical, like, oh, we can vote. But I think people would vote.
Okay.
But I don't think they'd use it very intelligently.
You have just described the average British 40-year-old.
Yes.
I mean, I just don't think there's much difference between that and most people. Are like that, aren't they?
Indeed. I mean, you'll be over the age, won't you? By the time that the next election comes around, you'll then be 20. So you'll be very mature, hopefully earning your own money, keeping your mother in the manner to which she's become accustomed. Annabelle, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the Daily Tea.
Thank you for having me.